whenever we are procrastinating or having a hard time getting started, yes, this is potentially your neurodivergent brain, but it's because there's an underlying need that isn't being met.
You're listening to the From Imposter to Empowered podcast. I'm your host, Jill Perrick, a business and mindset coach who specializes in imposter syndrome. If you feel like you're not as smart, capable, or worthy as you actually are, and that someone is going to find you out, then you've come to the right place. I went from being a struggling government worker, working my coaching business on the side, but feeling unworthy and burnt out, to making multiple six figures helping women overcome imposter syndrome so they too can sign clients, make bank, and have the business or career of their dreams. I am nothing special. I have a stuttering disability, ADHD, and I struggle with anxiety and depression. So if I can learn how to feel good enough and overcome my inner imposter, then so can you. Let's dig in.
Hi Queens, welcome back to the From Imposter to Empowered podcast. We are a couple months out from my wedding, which is freaking crazy. Low-key, I really do have a lot of anxiety about it. You guys, don't get me wrong, I love me some attention, but 8 hours of it solely on me? I mean, obviously it's going to be on Dustin too, but it's mostly going to be on me. Let's be real. So anyways, that shit is coming fast. It's so crazy, and I've been getting ready for the wedding, working with my incredible clients in the From Imposter to Empowered program and in the Fraud Squad Mastermind, and I am just loving where I'm at currently, just with business and my offers, and feeling so fucking aligned, and it hasn't always been this way. And I know it's really easy to get caught up in the highlight reel, and everybody's always saying how things are great, but it takes a lot of work and effort and tenacity and resilience to have a very successful business that you also love. And also, though, it's totally possible. So just want to leave you with that today. But let's get into the episode where I'm going to talk about my process for getting stuff done, even though I have ADHD. Even though it's very easy to get wrapped up in the things that we convince ourselves we should be doing for our business. And if you are somebody who, even if you're not at the beginning of your business, even if you're a couple years in and you find that you're always trying to catch up on things, or if you have ADHD and you really struggle with that executive dysfunction, getting things started, etc., this is going to be a really good episode for you. So something about me is I am a productive ass bitch. Even as somebody who has ADHD, I can get a lot of things done. So much so that I would gaslight the fuck out of myself for years that I didn't have ADHD and that I didn't actually struggle with anything. There were just times where I would be really, really lazy. And then there were times where I'd be really productive and I could get a ton of things done. But now I know what that is. It was a lot of anxiety. It was also where I was at in terms of my cycle too. And it was a lot of waiting until the last second and then doing something and feeling like I kind of half-assed it because I just couldn't get started. But then I got diagnosed with ADHD and it made a lot of sense. Okay. And now that I'm a couple years into my business, and if you have an online business, you know that you are the one motivating yourself to get things done. And that can be very difficult, especially if you're so used to having a job or being in school where there are set deadlines for doing things. So that's the first thing that I'm going to say here is that even if you run your own business, it can be very easy to use that freedom against yourself. And I still set deadlines and have plans for the projects that I do because that's just what works for me. Okay. So for example, when I created the From Imposter to Empowered program, I knew that it was going to have a full curriculum before I even launched it. And yes, I did wait until the last half of March when I was launching it on April 1st to create that curriculum. I did have my virtual assistant, Sheila. Shout out to Sheila. She's amazing. She edited everything within a week and a half span. And I was so thankful for her that I sent her a Starbucks gift card on top of actually fucking paying her because my ADHD had me procrastinating so hard on the curriculum, but I still got it done. And it is amazing. And the thing that I want you to hear though is that I did have a deadline. I set a hard deadline for myself. And I do that for everything. I do it for my launches. I do it if I'm creating a course. I do it if I'm doing things like my podcast. For example, I will set a deadline for when my virtual assistant will edit my podcast episodes, and I will have to have them uploaded to Kajabi by like the 26th of the month. So I make sure to record everything and do the descriptions and do the emails and schedule the emails, all that stuff for my podcast episodes before the 26th, because that is the date that I set, and it helps keep me on track and organized. And in no way does this feel rigid. Does it feel like I need to go against the man? Because I'm the man. Like, I'm the man here setting the deadlines. I get to ultimately decide if I have something that can be pushed out, if I don't really need to abide by a super strict deadline. I don't. But having that accountability, having that next layer of accountability that you don't necessarily have as an entrepreneur is just really helpful for me to get shit done. It's really so simple to set a deadline for yourself inside of your business and actually do that at the beginning of every project, every process, and everything that you do. For example, when I created the Perfect Launch Vault, which is my course on launching that my clients in the From Imposter to Empowered program, the Fraud Squad, one-to-one, in all of my coaching programs, you get access to my courses on content, sales, and launching. And you can also purchase the Perfect Launch Vault for $333 or 2 payments of $188 at the link in my show notes separately if that's what you choose to do. But in the Perfect Launch Vault, which is going to give you the mindset, the energetics, and the strategy behind your most profitable launch yet, I actually talk about in the very beginning to set dates for every step of your launch, for your opening of the cart, for the closing of the cart, for your launch event, for the incentives and when the incentives start and when they're done, all of that. Because what happens is people will say, I'm going to launch this offer, or I'm going to do this masterclass, or I'm going to do this challenge or this freebie. And the problem with this is like you have these ideas, but then you don't have a set date and you're not actually doing anything working towards it. So it can really prolong the time frame between having an idea and you actually putting that idea into motion. So when in doubt, set fucking dates for your things that you're gonna do. It is not rigid. It is not like a super set plan, but it is something that is going to keep you accountable and keep you on track. And if you can't be accountable to yourself just yet, be accountable to your coach or be accountable to a friend and actually check in with them throughout the time until that task is achieved. So as a person who has ADHD, another thing that I think is not talked about enough, and it's actually something that I talk a lot about in my best-selling self-published book, You're Not Special, I talk about how your self-talk is probably the most important thing when you have ADHD. Because if I didn't know how to talk myself through things, that is when I would procrastinate the most. That is when I would feel the worst about myself. That is when I would not get things done. But when I have good, empowering, confident self-talk, and it doesn't always have to be like, you're so amazing, you're so grateful, blah, blah, blah. It can be like, once you do this, you're going to feel so much better. And then you can reward yourself with X, Y, Z. Right? Like there are lots of times where I'm like, oh, this curriculum is feeling like a lot of work, or I'm working on this course. And I had these thoughts like as I was creating the Perfect Launch Vault, for example, I was like, is this even any good? Whatever. And like when I was working on the Perfect Launch Vault, for example, I was having these thoughts of like, is this even any good? And actually a hack that I use is I do it and then forget about it and come back to it. So I always like to finish the task and leave it and then come back to it an hour later, a couple hours later, even a different day. And you will almost always be like, this is actually quite good. So if you're doing an Instagram post, like I will do an Instagram post, I will write that post, I'll do the graphics, and at the time, I'll probably be kind of thinking, this isn't good, or this isn't very unique, or this is dumb, whatever. But then I come back to it, and almost always I see it in a different light, and I am also seeing it from a different state than I was in before. So I'm actually able to be like, oh, this is actually quite good. And that is really helpful for me to do. Another example of this is when I was writing my book, I would write a chapter or two and then I would just leave it. And then I would come back and I would read it over again and I would be like, this is very good, right? Because we're always the harshest critics on ourselves as we are in the creation process. So something that I would not do is write something for the book and edit and review it all in the same working session. Like I said, I would write it out, I would be creative, let everything out, and then I would go away and come back. And almost always I was looking at it with a fresh perspective and a fresh eye. And I always thought that the work I did was better than when I was actually doing it. So continuing on with this self-talk piece, it really is you in your voice and talking to yourself as if you would talk to your child or a friend, or if you would talk to like a business bestie who you were chatting with. And I think that this is something that is really, again, unheard of. It is not something that a lot of people talk about, because if they do, it's really surface level, but you are talking to yourself all day, every day. And if you are not encouraging yourself, if you're telling yourself like, yeah, this is shit, yeah, this isn't good, like this is something that I probably notice the most when it comes to clients that work with me and actually do the work. They do the inner work, they do the mindset work, they do the work that we do in my coaching programs. And one of the biggest shifts that I see in them is they're just able to get things done faster. They are way more resilient and tenacious. And that honestly comes from really good self-talk. It does not mean that you don't have negative thoughts. It does not mean that you don't experience heavy or bad emotions. It means that you are able to just like override those negative thoughts and talk yourself through it when these things happen. And confident self-talk is being able to have an actual conversation with yourself that does not result in you procrastinating even more or not doing what you said you're going to do. And that really does come from self-trust. It comes from knowing you're a good person. It comes from believing that you're good at what you do and that you are capable. And honestly, it comes from trusting your word. Because when you don't trust yourself, it's going to be really hard to believe anything that comes from you to you, right? So I think that really compassionate self-talk when you're frustrated, when you're trying to get started on something and it's just not going the way that you wanted it to, even when things are taking longer than you would have liked, is the way to go. And something that happens too with ADHD is the fact that I will estimate that a task is going to take a certain amount of time, but it actually takes me longer or takes me shorter. Usually it takes me longer. So I'll have a plan, for example, to do 2 podcast scripts in a day. And even though I have all day, I forget like, yeah, I've got to go to the gym. I've got to coach clients. There are things that are going to come up throughout the day. And if I don't get each of these scripts done, I can be really hard on myself, right? But it does take time to do a script for a podcast. So I also have to really work with my neurodivergent brain because it functions differently. It functions differently. We have a really hard time being inclined towards things that don't seem interesting or fun. And the good thing is I pretty much enjoy 99% of the job that I do. But like there are a lot of times where I don't want to have to do this script or write this content or show up on stories or whatever. There are a lot of things that have to do with having ADHD, having a neurodivergent brain that are going to feel very frustrated when all you want to do is get shit done and make money and sign clients, and you have all of these ideas and you really want to execute on them, and it can feel really hard to get started. So compassionate self-talk comes from that trust in yourself, that you mean well, that you're just trying to work with your brain and to give yourself that compassion, to give yourself that space when you can't get the job done or something is taking you longer than you would like it to. And also remembering that you're your own boss. So whenever I get stressed out about deadlines or timelines or like I need to get this done, I remind myself that there is no urgency. This is not the emergency room. This is not the hospital. I remind myself that I can take as long or as short of a time as I need. And I'm very cognizant of not shaming myself. I'm very cognizant of like, if I feel like I'm being lazy or whatever, like 99% of the time, I know I'm not being lazy because I do work a lot. I get a lot of stuff done. And I also like to think about the fact that because I'm showing up on social media and creating content, that is working. That is working. And for some reason, people don't classify that as working, especially if you get caught in fucking doom scrolling, which is not working. But if you're showing up and you're selling and you're creating content, you are working, even if your brain tries to tell you that you're not. If that's all you did today, that is enough. You are probably doing a lot more than you even realize, but because we don't get paid for our work in terms of that transactional, I work an hour and I get paid for that hour, right? Like we only get paid when a client actually pays us, but that's why you have to think about all the work you're putting in and all the time you're putting in, and you're probably actually working more than you even realize. And allow yourself to rest, allow yourself to have that space then, because you know when you are at work, you're fucking working. When you are putting the hours in, burning the midnight oil, and even if you are exercising, eating healthy, taking care of yourself, these things are also going to make you a better, more regulated business owner. And all of it matters. All of it matters because your energy and how you show up and the words you say and how you say them is really important. And you can't do that if you're stressed, if you're dysregulated, if you feel like you haven't done enough. So you can see how like all of these things play into each other. So no, you're not being lazy. What if you just need some time to zone out in front of the TV for a couple of hours and then you can be like, okay, I rested, I took my time, and now I'm ready to fucking go, right? So you are your own boss and you can decide what you do with your time. You can decide how you spend your time, and you can also decide to speak to yourself with compassion and with love and with knowing that like you're not being lazy. You are not being lazy at all, and you probably get way more done than you even realize. And another thing that I really wanted to say here is that I think there is a difference between hustling because you're not feeling good enough and feeling like, why am I doing this anyways, and feeling really discouraged, and like working hard because you love what you do. Because I just don't have those hustly thoughts. I really believe in my business and I'm like, this is it for me. This is what I want to do. I never want to work for someone else again. This is my long-term vision, which means that I am doing things right now and putting things in place now that are going to support my future. I'm investing in my business from where I want to be instead of where I am. And I think that has a huge impact on how I talk to myself when I'm going to do a project or creating content, right? Like I see that it's all adding up. It's all working out for me. I am somebody who shows up consistently. So I need to create content for the following week. Even if I don't feel excited about it, I still do it because I know that like this is going to feel so good when I get up in the morning and I don't have to think about what content is going out. It's just scheduled and going out. So I think that's a really good idea too, is to check in with yourself and be like, where am I not committed to my long-term vision of my future, and how is that impacting my everyday operations within the business? Because I think if you are somebody who doesn't feel committed to the long-term vision, you can't see your future, you think that you've invested so much money, like it isn't worth it, like you're never going to sign a client again, you feel frustrated, you want to stop working in your business, then yeah, that's going to impact the work that you get done, right? Like if you have no hope for the future of your business, it's obviously going to impact the work that you get done. Whenever we are procrastinating or having a hard time getting started, yes, this is potentially your neurodivergent brain, but it's because there's an underlying need that isn't being met, which is essentially the root of self-sabotage, right? So when there is an emotion or a need that is not being met, then we're going to self-sabotage. And for a lot of people, that can look like procrastination and not taking action on the things that they say they want to do. The best piece of advice that I could give you in this episode today is you need to figure out a way that works for you and your brain to get things done. And it's going to take a lot of trial and error, but I know for me that like all the hacks, all the tips and tricks, aside from me telling you to set a fucking deadline, and aside from me telling you to speak to yourself and learn to speak to yourself with compassion and without shame, the hacks only work some of the time, and even if they do work, they don't work forever. It really is about learning how to function with your brain and your body. So for example, if I feel like, wow, I can't get work done this week, it's taking me forever, I'm so tired, I'm having a lot of negative thoughts, I start thinking, where am I in my cycle? So I check like my Fitbit app and I try and figure out where I am in my menstrual cycle, and I'm usually in one of the phases where I'm going to be a bit more tired, I'm not as creative, etc. So in addition to having ADHD, I'm also very aware when there are circumstances that it would make sense why I'm so tired. It would make sense why I'm not as excited or motivated or feeling as creative. And this is not an opportunity to blame your lack of action or procrastination on these things. It's just information that helps me neutralize my emotions and how I feel. It helps me not go down the rabbit hole of like, oh, it's because I'm not good enough that I feel this way and there's nobody that's going to sign up, blah, 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 because those kind of thoughts don't create the actions that I want to take. I don't need to make this big bad mood or this low emotion or this feeling mean anything at all. It just means that I'm in my luteal phase. It just means that I'm tired. It just means that my ADHD brain is being extra difficult today. And that's okay. We're just going to roll with it, right? So it really helps to know your body and know what's going on with you emotionally, just for informational purposes. Like my client was spinning out last month and I was like, just curious, where are you in your cycle? And she was like, I'm on my period. And obviously that wasn't the only thing going on. Of course not. It never is. But it's just helpful information to have and to be aware of. And it surprisingly creates a lot of self-compassion and helps you get more done faster because of it. So sometimes you don't need to burn down your business. Sometimes you need to eat something nourishing, do a sweaty workout, ice facial, take a nap. Like sometimes there are things that we, of course, have to look at, but in your everyday working your business, living your life, there are things that you can do for your mental, your emotional, and your physical health that are going to solve a lot of your problems. So know your body and your brain, speak to yourself with compassion and from the perspective of your highest self, right? Like we talk so much about your highest self, but you know it's really powerful also speaking to your highest self like your highest self would speak to you. That is the magic ticket. If you were your highest self, you'd speak to yourself with the most compassion, the most support, and you'd also probably kick your ass into gear and get your shit done. And all the self-sabotage and procrastination, we know that there is an underlying emotion that needs to be acknowledged or a need not being met. And those are things that you can work through and be coached on. As always, you guys, you know what I'm going to say, and that is the fact that you need to look at it from the perspective of I'm not a fraud. I'm not going to make these thoughts mean anything about myself or these feelings that I'm having mean anything about my success or what I get to have. And in line with talking to yourself as if you were your highest self, you would not take a negative emotion or you procrastinating on something as an opportunity for you to shame yourself or tell yourself that you actually aren't capable or not good enough. A lot of the time it is the things that we talked about today, which is being neurodivergent, having ADHD, feeling emotional because of something that's going on with your brain, something that's going on with your body, the fucking weather outside, your cycle, whatever it is. You need to learn how to make nothing mean anything. And you guys know that this is my motto that I live by, that nothing means anything. No negative emotion, no negative thoughts, no negative circumstances even. And I'm going to do one thing, and that's get my motherfucking shit done. Get the things done that I said I was going to get done and take the moves towards what I'm working towards. This is why I have 5-figure cash months. This is why I have clients seemingly coming out of nowhere, right? Like this is why things have been consistently growing and been building for me even when there were times where, remember, I drove for Uber Eats or my income had gone down because my confidence had gone down. I've never stopped. I've never given up. And I never will. And a big part of that is because of the way that I learned how to regulate my nervous system, how I learned to work with my neurodivergent brain, and how I learned to talk to myself for maximum productivity. I am not special. There are a lot of things that could get in the way of me achieving the things that I want. And there are a lot of things with my mental health, with my mindset, with my emotions, with my personal life. There's all of these things that could get in the way, but I have bigger goals and a bigger vision for myself. And that's the other thing I think you really need to assess as well if you can't get things done is to assess your hope. And if you are harboring any resentment or negative feelings towards the future, if you're feeling like things aren't going to work out with you in your business, etc., if you're not really impacted by your long-term vision, it makes total sense why getting things done would be difficult for you. So set deadlines for yourself and create those opportunities for you to stick to some kind of schedule to keep yourself on track. Be in tune with your long-term vision and goals. Speak to yourself with the highest form of love, compassion, and empowerment as if you were your highest self now. And learn how to work with your brain and body's natural rhythms and needs. Being neurodivergent can really be difficult a lot of the time, but man, having a business when you have ADHD is such a blessing because it fucking sucks working for somebody else. Like, if anybody has to be the boss, at least it's you. Okay? I love ya. Love you so much. If you feel like I just get you and your brain and you want to be in a container of mine and get coached by me, join the From Imposter to Empowered program where you'll make $5,000 a month consistently, or join the Fraud Squad where you'll scale into $10,000 months. In my programs, we do mindset and belief, content and visibility, and making more money by doing what you fucking love. I want you to feel like you are making an impact with your work, and I also want you to be rich as fuck. So if that's your vibe, let's work together. The link to work with me in any one of my containers, as well as my courses, bundles, and free offers is at the link in my show notes. I'll see you there.
Thanks so much for listening to the From Imposter to Empowered podcast. Head to the show notes to learn how you can work with me, where you can buy my best-selling book, You're Not Special, and how to get on my email list for free. Screenshot this episode and add it to your Instagram stories, tagging me at Your Coach Jill. See you next time.